I would like to say good evening to everyone. I am Catherine Leggett, the Vice Chair of Montgomery County's Advisory Board of the Greater Washington Community Foundation. In the face of the pandemic and navigating through it, and at the beginning of the holiday season, with all of the year-end tasks that are looming, I am glad that you decided to join us tonight. I'm glad that you decided to treat yourselves by joining us in this 2021 celebration of giving. And believe me, you are in for a treat. I know all of us are delighted to be out, socializing, mingling, and this is the night when we celebrate our community champions for fueling our work, plus our donors, all of you, and partners for so generously responding to the needs across Montgomery County. We are so thankful to all of you. Of course, we'll also salute Kevin Beverly. Woo! Kevin, our 2021 Montgomery County Philanthropist of the Year, a longtime friend and steadfast community leader. Kevin, and I know all of you know this, has made a profound impact within the county through his generosity, his leadership, his empathy, and his desire to give and give and give. We're grateful to him for allowing us to shine a spotlight on him. And you know him, he's very humble. So allowing us to shine that spotlight is a big deal, and we thank you for that. Knowing his story, we are sure, will continue to inspire us and others to give more. So we're going to start the program. But before we dive into it, I want to call the President and CEO for the Greater Washington Community Foundation, Tonya, to come up and to give a few acknowledgments. Tonya.
Good evening, everyone. It is so nice to see you in person. The Greater Washington Community Foundation exists to bring people and resources together, to channel ideas into action, to explore tough questions, and to invest in solutions. For nearly 5 decades, the Community Foundation has had the honor and privilege of partnering with thousands of people, businesses, nonprofits, and government leaders. We are often the bridge between people who recognize they have more than they need and people who need more than they have. This past year, bless you, we faced a trifecta of crises: a global health pandemic, the ensuing economic crisis, and renewed calls for racial and social justice. Through partnerships, we galvanized over $11 million in community, foundation, and corporate support for our COVID-19 emergency response funds. This allowed us to help over 300,000 people from across our region. We also managed an additional $30 million in parallel funds established by government, business, and private donors to respond to our area's most pressing needs. In total, we dispersed over $78 million in grants to more than 7,000 nonprofits during our last fiscal year. We are proud that nearly 70% of that giving supported people and organizations across our geographic footprint. This evening, we shine a spotlight on everyone who makes up our extended network in Montgomery County, to reflect on what we've accomplished together and the work we have ahead. And of course, we first start with a few words of appreciation. It is my absolute honor to thank the supporters who have invested in the Community Foundation's work, the ones we call community champions. I'd like to especially spotlight our philanthropist, benefactor, leader, partner, and patron donors for their exceptionally generous gifts. To all of our community champions, you enable the Community Foundation to serve as our region's philanthropic quarterback throughout the compounding challenges we faced over the last year. Equally important, your support is enabling us to chart a new course toward a more equitable, just, and thriving future for our region. Not just one that's recovering, but a region where we all prosper together. Everyone, let's give a huge round of applause for our community champions. Next, we must give a special shout out to Scott and Jillian Copeland and your team at Bethesda Magazine. In addition to the beautiful profile on our Philanthropist of the Year, this holiday edition includes the annual Guide to Giving, featuring grantees that are vetted by our strategic initiatives here in Montgomery County. Please grab your copy so that you can read about the amazing work of our nonprofit organizations. Again, thank you, Scott and Jillian, for helping to spread the word about the Community Foundation, the great work of our nonprofits, and the inspiring example of Kevin Beverly. We have many elected officials and public sector partners who have worked in close relationship with us, really at a completely different level. As a result, we maximized both our public and our private dollars to meet the needs across this community. Everyone, please join me in recognizing our elected officials and public sector colleagues for their extraordinary partnership over this last year. And of course, I must call out our nonprofit colleagues for your unwavering commitment to our community. We are so deeply grateful for the numerous ways in which you reinvented, pivoted, stretched yourselves to respond to our community's needs. Let's give the nonprofit community a round of applause. And finally, I want to offer my sincere thanks to the Community Foundation's Board of Directors for trusting us, for the Community Foundation's staff, for all of our volunteers, for your amazing hard work over the last year. It is truly an honor to serve with you. Let's give a round of applause. Final one. And so before I turn the spotlight on to our honoree, I'd like to call my amazing colleague, Anna Hargrave, to share our Montgomery County report to the community for 2021.
Thank you, Tonya, and thank you all. To our new friends, I should first explain how our community of givers makes an impact through the foundation. In addition to the community champions who support our work, there are thousands of people, businesses, and foundations that give through our strategic leadership partnerships, pooling resources so we can make a deeper impact than any of us could achieve alone. Hundreds of folks also create their own named giving funds so they can support all the causes that they care about here and around the world. And many turn to the Community Foundation to steward their philanthropic legacies so they can continue to support their favorite causes in perpetuity. For context, about 10 years ago, the combined generosity of our community of givers enabled us to deploy $5.7 million to organizations serving Montgomery County. Now, the green represents the giving that came directly from our fund holders, their own funds, out into the community, and the blue represents our legacy donors and the pooled giving efforts. By fiscal year 2020, as you'll see, the combined total had grown to over 7 million. And then the pandemic struck. In response, we collectively deployed over $18 million into Montgomery County. That was made possible because our donors dug deep and then spread the word to their friends, challenging them to step up for our community too. But in addition to their extraordinary generosity, the Montgomery County Council and government teamed up with us on several fronts so we could strategically advance our coordinated response efforts together. Of course, that money would have been collecting dust in the bank if it weren't for our amazing nonprofit and community partners. Their ingenuity and dedication converted those dollars into relief for thousands of people. By working together, we provided direct cash assistance so our neighbors in dire need could keep a roof over their heads. We partnered with childcare providers, the Black and Brown Coalition, MCPS, the county, and the amazing team behind the Children's Opportunity Fund to provide in-person childcare to 1,500 kids who were struggling with virtual learning. Through our Food for Montgomery initiative, we teamed up with nonprofits, businesses, farmers, our food council, and county agencies to help the 1 in 10 neighbors who didn't know where their next meal would come from. And of course, we supported frontline health workers to help families recover from COVID-19 and vaccinate people as quickly as possible so our economy and community could begin to recover. So yeah, it's been a busy year. And on top of all that, Tonya led our trustees, advisory board members, and staff on a process to develop a new 10-year strategic framework for the foundation. After listening to all our stakeholders, we realized that we have a great and pressing opportunity to build a region that is equitable, just, and thriving, a region where we all prosper together. So what will this take? Well, first, we must pursue an equitable recovery from COVID-19, particularly focusing on the areas that have been hit hardest. Some people think the pandemic is effectively over, but we know that our nonprofits are still serving thousands who are struggling. This includes our low-income essential workers who were heralded as heroes just last year, and thousands of families who are still reeling from the loss of breadwinners and caregivers. We cannot have a healthy, thriving economy while those neighbors are still suffering. So ultimately, we must work to close the racial wealth gap that undermines so much of our philanthropic and public investments. I've heard from so many of our donors over the past year that the murder of George Floyd lit a spark, revealing the inequities across America in terms of housing, education, healthcare, food security, policing, criminal justice, income, and employment. We believe that changing the prospects for how the most marginalized people generate and sustain wealth will change every other disparity affecting our community. This will benefit all of us and put us on a path toward a Montgomery County and Greater Washington region where we truly can prosper together. To our donors and partners, thank you for inspiring this new direction. I know you'll continue to work with us as we chart the course toward a brighter future for our whole community. To our new friends, if you aren't sure of how to dig in, or if you have questions about whether you can really make a difference, I encourage you to look for inspiration from our 2021 Montgomery County Philanthropist of the Year, Kevin Beverly. Now, our board first created this honor to both educate people about the needs in Montgomery County, but also raise up the examples of people who are making a profound difference. In recognition of our founder, each year we present our honoree with the Clifford M. Kendall Award. Now, as you'll see, our list of past honorees is quite an illustrious group. While they give to many causes, they share a practice of becoming deep partners with their nonprofits and rolling up their sleeves to get the work done. And our 2021 honoree is no exception. I had the pleasure of meeting Kevin during his first tour of duty on the Montgomery County Advisory Board. Yep, we nabbed him twice. I was impressed by the high bar for corporate philanthropy that he set while leading social and scientific systems, empowering his employees to shape the company's giving priorities, and then backing them up, volunteering for everything they came up with. Like many of you, I've been inspired by how his personal passion compels him to get involved with many youth-focused organizations, from college tracks to our own Children's Opportunity Fund and more. The combination of his leadership and generosity has been game-changing. We wanted to give you a chance to get to know Kevin the way we have. So in lieu of a traditional acceptance speech, we're gonna have an Oprah-style interview led by none other than Andy Burness, who was our 2019 honoree along with his wife, Hope. We'll bring up Andy and Kevin in just a few minutes, but first, I'd like to direct your attention to the video so a few friends can tell you a bit more about what makes Kevin so special.
We grew up in Maryland on the Eastern Shore, Dorchester County. When we were there, the schools in Maryland, and particularly Dorchester County, was still segregated. And as a result, we went to a segregated one-room school. This school was heated by what we now call a pot-belly stove. That stove had to be stoked. In my case, I was large for my age, and I was one designated to put wood in the stove to keep the stove going, and that's how children stayed warm. I learned from Kevin that he too had stoked this stove. Today, Kevin is still stoking the flame. He's still keeping the fire going for those young people in the community. I knew from an early age that Kevin was a giver.
When Kevin makes a commitment, he's all in. Time, talent, and treasure. But he doesn't stop there. He galvanizes others so they can work together to take that organization to the next level.
He's so authentic, he's caring, and he's so present. And just being with him makes you feel like you're being embraced with a hug. So when he asks you to help with a worthy cause, you just can't say no to Kevin's smile.
Kevin is rare in the sense that he leads by way of example.
I think Kevin is the busiest person I know. It is absolutely incredible what he squeezes into a day, a month, and a year.
Kevin's knowledge, strategic thinking, and keen insights have propelled his favorite nonprofits to tackle problems and pursue bold goals for our community.
His passion lies in supporting particularly the most vulnerable communities in Montgomery County.
Kevin was a dream board chair. He was always there for me whenever I needed him. He was just a phone call away.
While serving on our Montgomery County Advisory Board, Kevin always joined us in going out to talk to nonprofit leaders to hear what was happening in the community. I remember one day he joined us on a visit to an organization called College Tracks. And talking with those young people, hearing their aspirations, I could tell Kevin saw himself in their stories.
Neither my mom nor dad graduated from high school. So I'm a first-generation college graduate. My sister followed, and he then followed, both becoming college graduates.
Being a first-generation American in this country without having parents that have ever gone to college here, they don't have the idea or even the knowledge to help their children go to college.
Anupam went through our College Tracks, College Access and Success program. He started with us in his junior year of high school. He got into his dream college, which is the University of Maryland, got himself a great job when he graduated, and was able to help buy a house for his mother, actually.
Without Kevin's help and without his leadership, without his vision, I don't think my trajectory would be as far as it is today.
Kevin believes every kid should have a strong foundation and get the opportunities and resources they need to achieve their full potential.
What Kevin did was, after our mom died, he established a scholarship in the name of our mom for a student from Cambridge High School. And what I learned from Kevin, just if one more student could come out of Cambridge and get off to college and do well, then he's helped.
Kevin's leadership has enabled so many important organizations to tackle huge problems and pursue bold goals.
Kevin's role, his model, is one that we should all follow. Roll up your sleeve, get engaged, not just write a check, not just lend your name, but be responsive and responsible to the needs and challenges we face.
Kevin, I'm absolutely proud of what you've accomplished.
Congratulations. This is an award that's well deserved. You deserve it, my friend.
Thank you for inspiring me and so many others to step it up where it really matters. The ripple effect of your leadership has impacted thousands of lives, and for that I am so very grateful.
Kevin, thank you for demonstrating the powerful impact we can make when we team up and give with all our hearts the way you do for our community.
Kevin, congratulations on this amazingly well-deserved honor. You are a philanthropist in every possible way, in what you donate, in what you do, in how you love and connect the communities that you believe so much in. Thank you so much.
It's my honor, but there are a lot of other people who would have wanted to do this, and several came up to me. And so I'm going to start with the first question they were asking me questions about you, so I figured I'd just share them. And one of them came from Hugh Pinero, you know Hugh. And he wanted to know, to get started, why you have so little body fat. And how?
Genetics, maybe?
Not the bike rides or anything like that. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, really? Okay, better? Okay. So before I do have some questions, but I want to ask this to get the stage set, that people understand not how you lived in that video, which is true, of course, but why don't we start with today? Why don't you tell everybody what you did today? Just what was your day like until you came here? Regular day?
Well, I guess it started at about 5. I had interviews. Today was one of the 2 days we had set aside to interview the candidates for the president of Montgomery College. So today was the second day of 2 days that started at 7 o'clock. And but it's also my day that I deliver food over to Greencastle Elementary School. And so I had to go early.
Like what time did you go this morning?
About 5:30.
5:30 morning. So you were doing it today.
There's a lot of little kids over there.
Yeah, I know. There's need. Let me ask you a question that based on something that we've talked about before. You've had marital advice to give various people. And one of them was, you said that it's always smart when giving a talk to thank your wife or your husband. What do you want to say to that?
Well, you know, everybody knows if you got a spouse or a partner that all the things that you do have to be granted to you. And I have been so fortunate we've been married 38 years, but we've been together since 1975. And I kind of knew it early that this was going to be my life partner. I don't think she knew it at the time. It took a couple of crochet hooks and about 2 miles of crochet about that wide for me to get up courage to ask her to go out with me. And ever since then, I've known I've had a partner who would be there with me for as long as I needed to be there with me. So I just want to say thank you, Diane, for all of the time you give me, the support you give me. Because all the times I'm out doing this stuff, oftentimes she's there with me. Whether we're cleaning up a school, whether we're delivering food or packing food, she's always there. The one just picking things out of my face or doing all sorts of stuff. And I also have to acknowledge her mom, who are again two of the gentlest souls you're going to find on the planet. They're both very quiet, but just so steadfast, and have just been just wonderful to me. I lost my mom in '97. We lost our mom in '97, and Miss Ann Atlee has been a mom to me ever since, and I've always appreciated that. And it looks like it gets I was worried I was not going to be able to sit here without just bawling, because I do that a lot, unfortunately. But to see my brother stand there and knowing how hard it was for him to achieve what he's achieved in his life, and to hear him say how proud he was of me was a highlight for me. So I really do appreciate that, Larry. And people. I mean, there's some other guys in this room. I mean, Ike Leggett is one of them. Saul Graham's another, and my brother. I mean, these guys are truly. I always say that my brother walked on gravel, which allowed me to walk on pavement. The pathways were more difficult than one can imagine when they were coming along trying to do what they were doing. Getting an education being first and foremost, but then starting businesses, and then recognizing that set the example for me of being able to recognize when Saul Graham and Ike cornered me at a University of Shady Grove's event and said, "We're done, you need to take this stuff on." I wasn't quite sure what he meant, but I now understand what he meant. And I appreciate all that each of you have done to support me as I've tried to carry this mantle that you guys carried so high for so long. So thank you for that. And if I can also acknowledge my sister who's here, coming up from Georgia. I think it's the first time she's been on a plane since this pandemic started, so I appreciate her coming up here as well. And I have my sister-in-law here, Jean, and one of my nieces as well, Deborah. So I thank you guys for coming up as well. It's a family that takes this.
So, sorry about that. So, the Bethesda Magazine piece and this video speak to your life in Cambridge. And I would call it, in short, a life of inspiration. Sorry. But that life of inspiration influenced you. You talked a little bit about that here, but it also influenced your philanthropy. And you talk a lot about giving back. Can you make the connection between growing up, what that's meant to you, and how you see philanthropy and what giving back means to you?
I knew you were going to start. My biggest concern when that was Andy in these questions. And then my worst fear was that it would not be Andy, it would have been Hugh. But he somehow managed to get one in here anyway. But so I think Larry in that video kind of said we were raised on a little road. Cambridge was the closest town to us. We were down on a little island called Taylor's Island, which right now is under threat of sea level rise. And it's disappearing. Our cemeteries, our churches are all under threat. People probably in this crowd talk about the properties you have on the water. Well, our property is in the water, and part of that community, while I was growing up there, really did have an influence on me in terms of how I think about philanthropy, because everybody on that road was related to one another, and if one didn't have, others did. And it wasn't like they had a lot, but we shared. And my mother would always say, if you ever got an opportunity to give back, you just should. We don't whine. You just need to be able to recognize when you got a little bit more, you give. And that's always been something that I think has been drilled into my whole family. I think my brother, who to me is the consummate public servant, he spent his entire career in the Army, and after the Army has spent the rest of his time, I think sometimes to my sister-in-law's chagrin, of giving his time away free to a lot of organizations where they live, doing the same kinds of thing. It's just embedded. My sister, similarly. It's just something that throughout our history, what our parents, grandparents all said to us, if you got a little bit more, then it ought to go to someone else.
Let me move the subject to something a little bit different. You are a lot of things. You are a philanthropist. You are a bike rider. You are an expert crab server. You're a lot of things. But you are also a black man in a racist society, in a racist world around you. Can you talk about that with respect to what insights you want to offer us about philanthropy, about service, about any of that? And one thing, you may not know this, I am an avid reader of the Talbot Spy, favorite newspaper of Talbot County. And in here is a project you're working on. So you might want to talk a little bit about that relates to race.
Okay. Well, so your point's an interesting point. And if my mom were here, she would say, in God's eyes, all men are the same. And that you should judge all men as an individual and not as a group. And when I think about, I'm looking at this audience. This is an audience that I think represents a lot of Montgomery County. But at the same time, we've got an issue around racism that I think oftentimes gets overlooked. I think oftentimes in quote the woke world, I still think it's wake up world. But part of what I think we miss in here is that there are people and organizations that have been founded and started in Montgomery County that were founded and started by white members of our society. And over time, those members of those societies, before the woke world happened, were doing this work. And not until recently have the minority communities really been engaged or invited to be engaged in leadership in those organizations. And I think that's very important. But I always fall back on the fact that the individual is how we've got to rate people. Racism is a terrible thing, and it has to be dealt with at the individual level. You have to set an example and break stereotypes of how people think about you and how people think about classes of people. Because at the end of the day, it's all about our individual approach to getting things done that's going to help us achieve the next level of philanthropy or giving, or however you want to call it. I just don't think when we say the word racist that we have to be careful because there are a lot of people who I think are just uninformed. They don't try hard enough to understand, and if you leave them to their own devices, they'll never understand. But I think we do have to spend time educating and bringing people to the table to have conversations about this topic.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of us have certainly undergone education, to use your words, since George Floyd got murdered. And there's a lot of education to go around. The Greater Washington Community Foundation, led by Tonya, put on this terrific the annual meeting, and then the Michelle Singletary Book Club gathering. If you haven't seen Michelle Singletary, here's an ad, her 10-part series in the Washington Post on race and finance. It's fascinating, and you're going to learn a lot. But I'm going to guess that most of us have undergone some education over the last couple of years. And there's a point at which we can always get more educated. But what advice do you have for us on what we can do beyond education to actually make things better, to actually walk the talk, to actually go from beyond saying I know more to I actually did something?
I think you've got to start by, again, writing checks is one thing, but engaging in the activities of this work is to me as important, if not more so. Some of you may be familiar with Paul Farmer. He ran an organization and continues to run an organization called Partnership for Health. And one of the things that he said I thought that was very profound is that if you're going to solve a problem, you've got to go to where the worst of it happens. And when he went into Africa to do this work around HIV and trying to stem this pandemic, he went to some of the worst places to try and figure this out. And I think that's what we oftentimes, when we write checks, we fail to recognize. We're doing good things because money is important. I can't stress that enough to everybody here who hasn't given to this. Money is very important, but there's so much more you can do, especially when I look around this room and look at the talent that's here, of the nonprofits that we have here and where I come on the Eastern Shore, of how they could take advantage of the talents that you have with leadership, with administrative and financial acumen. Those are the kinds of things that these nonprofits need in order to get this going. You mentioned George Floyd's murder, and that had a profound impact on the country. I know it affected me in a way I never thought it would, to be able to watch that on film, to have someone with a knee on their neck until the life was just taken away from them, to recognize how nonchalantly someone could do that without thinking. And I think part of what we need to do as a society, honestly, is to take a step back and think about the things that we should be doing in terms of philanthropy, of getting engaged with the communities that you live in, and making sure that you're not just giving a little. You always say this to me: if you gave enough and you didn't think about it, then you didn't give enough. And I think that's all of your time as well as your treasure. So when you were talking about this thing down on the Eastern Shore, and like I said, Cambridge was the closest town to me, and I've gone back there to try and help build on what I've learned here in Montgomery County. Some of the programs that we have here are a bit foreign, and certainly the kind of collaboration that we have here is foreign. Some of you may remember 1967, but there was a fire in Cambridge. Some people think of it that way. Some people call it a riot. But at the end of it, we had a community that was divided in such a way that even today you have a hard time getting them to have conversations about it. So you think about Cambridge, and ironically, the street that separates the white community from the black community is called Race Street. It's kind of ironic, but at the same time, you think about that over 50 years plus now, that they still haven't been able to merge across that street and take into account the children, black and white, and focus on the one thing that the majority of them all have in common, is that they're poor people. Race gets brought into it in a way that's sometimes, I think, destructive, when in fact we're really talking about the plight of poor people. And if we focused on that, and we could get the philanthropy to focus on that, I think we'd be better served.
So you focused on that through your business as well. Yeah. You and I met, I don't quite remember, but I'm going to say it was with Montgomery Moving Forward. We actually did something together.
Yeah.
So we both owned businesses in the county, and we were both thinking that getting involved in some service was a good thing to do. But it was defining for you at Social and Scientific Services.
Systems,
thank you. Thank you, good at it. So it was defining, and I don't think that's the norm for business leaders. many, but not the norm, and it's something that was really important to you. Can you talk about how and why you built philanthropy or giving back or whatever you want to call it into your business, and why, not why, but how you can advise private sector leaders and employees in the room here to get more involved from the perspective of a business?
Well, as you know, as a business, yourself as a business leader, one of the things that you do, you have a platform. You make money, you provide services, and you live in a community that you want to see succeed. And so uh, we spend a lot of time in business trying to figure out what our bottom line looks like. And we always had two. We had two bottom lines. One to do well, the other's to do good. And part of that, I think, is in this room. I just worked on a project with Craig Rupert and Pat that was amazing, called In America, Remember. And you couldn't imagine that the number of resources that Craig and his company put forward to make that event happen. But it's leaders like that who I look up to when they do things like that. It reminds me of what businesses should be doing. We live in this community. We want the amenities in this community. We want not just the white kids to succeed. We want the Asian kids to succeed. We want the African American kids to succeed. We want the Hispanic kids to succeed. We want our immigrant populations who come here from other places to succeed. It makes us a better community. And you won't find a more diverse population than we have here. And for our businesses to not take full advantage of that population is a tragedy. And so when I think about what we did at Social and Scientific Systems, and again, I didn't found that company. I showed up there, and I showed up to a group of people who on a daily basis got up every day trying to solve HIV. They were already committed. And so when we had the opportunity in our community to give back, and we form this committee and they would say, well, this is what we want to work on. And my point to them was, can we scale it? Can we make a difference in our community? And instead of them just saying, no, we just want to do it in this one place, they wanted to take it everywhere. And when they volunteered, I volunteered. And I think as a leader, if you want somebody to follow you, you got to get in it. You can't just say, oh, we're going to match every dollar you put into this fund. That's good. But when you're going to go out and plant flowers next to East Silver Spring Elementary, or when I went to Africa, I would say, okay, who's going this month? And they would head to Africa. And while they were there, they'd get our work done, but they also spend time at the orphanage that we had adopted. And to me, that was an important adventure for all of them. And I had, my CFO, God bless him, he was not the guy who you believe would do this kind of stuff, but he went there and it changed his life. And I think as business leaders get engaged and start to invest not only their treasure, but their time, you get a different perspective. And what gave me the perspective is those that came before me. Some of you in this room may remember Herb Miller, who was a cancer took his life. And Herb, I think, started a company that had that as its part of it, is that there are two bottom lines. And I basically just try to take it to a different level by getting more deeply involved personally.
So it's time. It's time and money in a sense.
Well, and you've got talents. I mean, I'm looking into this room. There is an enormous amount of talent in this room. There is an enormous number of nonprofits out there who could use those talents. Find one that you love and let that be where you start. Because education is where I've put my stake in the ground. But I also know that kids who are hungry aren't going to learn as well. I also know that kids who are in trauma aren't going to learn that well. I also know that those kids, if they don't have things to do after school, aren't going to learn that well. They're going to get into other things. So you can't just invest in what you think is this one thing. You've got to spread yourself across all of the things that connect this, because that safety net is why it's a net. There's a lot of things that are trying to fall through it. And I think you've got to invest in all of them, all of those things, whether it's the education piece, whether it's food insecurity, whether it's after school programming, whether it's literacy. You've got to invest in all of those things in order to make that kid whole.
That was great. Thank you. So, if I'm correct, you have been honored before, somewhere between 300 and 723 times. But this honor is different, and we talked some about that. And so, as a final question, talk a little bit about what this particular recognition from the Community Foundation means to you, and whatever comes to mind with respect to how you're feeling right now.
Well, a little overwhelmed, but the reason that I am probably sitting here is because Sally Rudney, who's one of the true leaders in this community, who I think needs to be acknowledged here this evening, who's not present. She was a Leadership Montgomery classmate of mine, and introduced me to the Community Foundation. I mean, I've always been in high energy. I think it still frustrates my wife. But at the same time, sometimes energy, if you don't direct it, just it's not helpful. And what Sally did for me was to introduce me to the Community Foundation. And from there, I got to meet Nancy Leopold at College Tracks, where I really did go to a site visit and found my world. I found a group of kids who just looked like me. They were there, they had energy, but direction was an issue. And what she did with College Tracks, and I think it was at Wheaton High School. Yeah, it's a Paul Farmer analogy to me. She had taken a program that had started in BCC by a bunch of concerned parents, helping some kids, one of our most urban schools, but also fairly high income population. But in that school, you had East Silver Spring kids who weren't so high income, that needed opportunity. And what she did after she started it there, she went to one of the worst high schools in our county at the time, Wheaton High School. And she performed that same magic again. And it just made me recognize that how much one person could do. Just think about it, if she had more than just herself to do it, it would have been so much. So I joined. And from there, it led me to Business Leaders for Hunger, working against hunger. It led me to McHale. It led me to Passion for Learning. It led me to Manna. It led me to so many opportunities. And I thank each and every one of those nonprofit leaders for giving me the opportunity to learn a lot more about what was needed in my community. And that if I could, in my capacity, encourage others to get involved, then I think I've done a pretty good thing. But to answer your question, why is it important? Because this platform, I was struggling with it for a while. People would say congratulations. I didn't really know what to say to that. But this platform really does give me an opportunity to ask all of those who are business leaders out there. And I focus on that because I think that's the part of our community that still needs to get engaged in this in a different way. We've got some good examples out there. But I think we really do, as business leaders, have to recognize just how important all of these services that we need for our children, those who have and those who have not, need to make sure that they get the opportunities that they deserve. And I'll finish with this. Why is it important? This organization was the foundation of how I got started in this. And I appreciate, again, Nancy and Sally, and then the other one I like to talk about is the little force of nature, Sharon Friedman, who also has been just an outstanding leader in terms of bringing change to our community. It's important that we all take a time, take a breath, and then dig deep and figure out what's important to us. But this organization has been just a bedrock in this community. You know, Cliff Kendall and a few guys got this thing started, and now we're looking at the next generation and in Tanya's leadership, our ability to actually regionalize some of the things we're doing locally becomes a real possibility. I think we get caught in our little silos oftentimes, and we forget that we're in the DMV. And the DMV is bigger than Maryland. It's bigger than Virginia. It's bigger than the District of Columbia. We share similar problems. We have different ways of solving them, but through the Community Foundation, it's a great gateway in order to put all of this work that we do collectively. And I think that's what it means to me, the opportunity to just, thank the Community Foundation for all the incredible work that they do in our community. And again, we launched the Children's Opportunity Fund out of the Community Foundation. It's a great incubator to get something started in Montgomery County, and now we're sitting on the precipice of changing childcare in Montgomery County because of our Community Foundation's efforts of nurturing a fund effectively. Well, and putting it in a position where now our county government's looking to do some really, really, I think, exciting things in childcare. So stay posted on that.
So you want to thank the Community Foundation, which I'm glad you did, but we need to thank you. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your goodness. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for everything you do. And I'm not alone. All these people feel the same way. I happen to know that. Can you give a round of applause for Kevin Beverly?
I'm a very proud chair of the Community Foundation Montgomery County Advisory Board. And once again, I really must thank all of the community champions whose generosity makes the foundation's work possible. And to Kevin, we are so grateful for all you have done for this county and for allowing us to shine the light on you. To all our new friends, I invite you to join us. You can open your own fund or build a legacy to support your favorite causes. You can team up through one of our strategic initiatives, and you can become a community champion and be the fuel of this vital work. By working together, I know we can build a more equitable, just, and thriving future for our whole community. So please enjoy the rest of the evening at our reception. Connect with the generous, passionate philanthropists and our innovative, dedicated nonprofit leaders, as well as our public sector partners. Be sure to grab a copy of Bethesda Magazine on your way out so you can read Kevin's story and also browse at the Guide to Giving that's featuring all of our nonprofits. And finally, we did make a virtual guest book so that everyone here will have an opportunity to congratulate Kevin with a very personal message. So please be on the lookout for an email that should be coming to you tomorrow morning. Again, thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.